Hey, greetings, parents. Welcome to Leap into Literature Night. So every day we have what's called read aloud time, and it's not just sit back and chill time. No, it's where we learn how to listen. And listeners have to think about what they hear. They think about what they know and what they wonder. So during read aloud time, students make a T-chart where they record what they know and what they wonder. And so on this Leap into Literature Night, we're going to celebrate Charlotte's Web. It's not just a cutesy little book about animals. Oh no, there are so many themes in this book. And E.B. White just packs it full of background, everything we can see and hear and smell and taste and touch. And so he just gives us a total picture of this book. And so the fourth graders are going to share what's on their mind with you. Thanks for joining us.
Before breakfast. Where's Papa going with that axe? Said Fern to her mother as they were sitting at the table for breakfast. Out to the hoghouse, replied Miss Arable. Some pigs were born last night. I don't see why he needs an axe, continues Fern, who was only 8. Well, said her mother, one of the pigs was a runt.
The start of Charlotte's Web is kind of brutal. Here, I'll read you a page. Please don't kill it, she sobbed. It's unfair. Mr. Arable stopped walking. Fern, she said gently, you'll have to learn to control yourself. Control myself, yelled Fern. This is a matter of life and death, and you talk about controlling myself?
I chose this passage because it shows how strong Fern is. Tears ran down her cheeks as she took hold of the axe and tried to pull it out of her father's hand. Fern said Mr. Arable, I know more about raising a litter of pigs than you do. A weakling makes trouble. Now run along. But it is unfair, cried Fern. The pig couldn't help being born small, could it? If I had been very small at birth, would you have killed me? Mr. Arable smiled. Certainly not, he said, looking down at his daughter with love. But this is different. A little girl is one thing, a little runty pig is another. I see no difference, replied Fern. Still hanging on to the axe. This is the most terrible case of injustice I have ever heard of. A queer look came over on John Arable's face. He seemed almost ready to cry himself. All right, he said, you go back to the house and I will bring the runt when I come in. I'll let you start on a bottle like a baby. Then you will see what trouble a pig can be.
Great.
Page 4. Something exciting happened. And I chose this part because I think it is exciting. So this is what happened. Fern Dad went to the sink and washed his hands and dried them on a roll of towel. Fern came slowly down the stairs. Her eyes were red from crying. As she approached her chair, the curtain wobbled and there was a scratchy noise. Fern looked at her father. Then she lifted the lid off the curtain. There inside, looking at her, was a newborn pig. It was a white one. The morning light shone through his ears, turning them pink. His ears, said Mr. Arable, saved from an untimely death, and may the good Lord forgive me for this foolishness.
When Fern was at school, she thought deeply about her pig, and this is what happened. She was still thinking about the pig when the teacher said, Fern, what's the capital of Pennsylvania? Wilbur, replied Fern dreamily.
Chapter 3 starts explaining the barn. The barn was very large and very old, and smelled of hay, and it smelled of manure. It smelled of the perspiration of tired horses, and the wonderful sweet breath of patient cows. It often had a peaceful smell, as though nothing bad could ever happen in the world again. It smelled of grain and of harness dressing, and axle grease, and of rubber boot and new rope.
Whenever the cat was given fish head to eat, the barn smelled of fish, but it mostly smelled of hay, for there was always hay in the great loft overhead, and it was always being pitched down to the cows and horses and sheep.
We chose this passage because it made us feel peaceful. The barn was very large, it was very old, and it smelled of hay and it smelled like manure. It smelled of perspiration, of tired horses and the wonderful sweet breath of patient cows. It often had a sort of a peaceful smell, as though nothing bad could happen ever again in the world.
It often had a sort of peaceful smell in it, through the smelling of grains and hardness dressing on an ass, grease and rubber boots and a new robe. And whatever the cow was giving a fish head to eat, the barn would smell of fish, but mostly it smelled of hay, for there was always hay in the great loaf up ahead, and there was always hay being pitched down to the cows and the horses and the sheep. Warm in the winter, when the animals spent most of their time indoors, pensively cool in summer, when the big doors stood open to breeze, the barn had scales on the floor.
Every single day, Wilbur would eat the following: warm milk, potato skins, wheat middlings, Kellogg's cornflakes, and to top it all off, he would eat a popover left from the Zuckerman's breakfast.
We chose this passage because we like the rain and we like the way it's described in the book.
The next day was rainy and dark. Rain fell on the roof of the barn and dripped steadily from the trees. Rain fell in the barnyard and rain in crooked course down into the lane where thistle and privet grew.
Rain splattered against Mrs. Zuckerman's kitchen windows and came gushing out of the downspouts. Rain.
Page 32. Wilbur cannot sleep. The night seemed long. Wilbur's stomach was empty and his mind was full. And when your stomach is empty and your mind is full, it's always hard to sleep. A dozen times during the night, Wilbur woke and stared into the blackness, listening to the sounds and trying to figure out what time it was. A barn is never perfectly quiet. Even at midnight, there is usually something.
Charlotte's Web. Stop, screaming Wilbur. I don't want to die. Save me, somebody save me. Fern was just about to jump up when a voice was heard. Be quiet, Wilbur, said Charlotte, who had been listening to this awful conversation. I chose this passage because it tells about the night. A dozen times during the night, Wilbur woke up and stared into the blackness, listening to the sounds and trying to figure out what time it was. A barn is never perfectly quiet. Even at midnight, there is usually something stirring. He never felt lonely when she was near in the distance. He could still hear the music of the merry-go-round. As he was dropping off to sleep, he spoke to Charlotte. Sing me that song again about the dung and the dark, he begged. The reason why I chose this passage is because it tells how much Fern cares about Wilbur. Fern loved Wilbur more than anything. She loved to stroke him, to feed him, to put him to bed. Every morning, as soon as she got up, she warmed his milk.
It's a perfectly beautiful egg sack, said Wilbur, feeling as happy as thought he had constructed it himself. Yes, it is pretty, replied Charlotte, patting the sack, which her two front legs away. I can't grunt that. It is strong. It's made out of the toughest material I have. It is also waterproof. The eggs are inside and will be warm and dry.
I chose this passage because it was talking about how to save Wilbur. One evening, a few days after writing had appeared in Charlotte's web, the spider called a meeting of all the animals in the barn cellar. I shall begin calling roll. Wilbur, here, said the pig. Gander, here, 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 said the gander. You sound like 3 ganders, muttered Charlotte. Why can't you just say here? Why do you have to repeat everything? It's my idiosyncrasy, replied the gander. Goose, said Charlotte. Here, 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 said the goose. Charlotte glared at her.
The reason why I chose is because it describes that there is no less than nothing. Wilbur next tried one of the lambs. Will you play with me? He asked. Certainly not, said the lamb. In the first place, I cannot get into your pen as I'm not old enough to jump over the fence. In the second place, I am not interested in pigs. Pigs mean less than nothing to me. What do you mean less than nothing? replied Wilbur. I don't think there is any such thing as less than nothing. Nothing is absolutely the limit of nothingness. It's the lowest you can go. It's the end of the line. How can something be less than nothing? If there were something that was less than nothing, then nothing would be nothing. It would be something, even though it's just a little bit of something. But if nothing is nothing, then nothing has nothing that is less than it is. Oh, be quiet, said the lamb. Go play by yourself. I don't play with pigs.
That was just...
The night seemed long. Wilbur's stomach was empty, and his mind was full. And when your stomach is empty and your mind is full, it's always hard to sleep.
That was good.
I chose this passage because it tells about the backgrounds and the backgrounds of what's happening in this story right now. When morning came, everybody got up at daylight. The day was hot up the road at the Arable's house. Fern lugged a pail of hot water to her room.
Sweet, David.
I chose this paragraph because it's telling everything about breakfast and what it is made out of breakfast. Breakfast at 6:30. Silk milk, crust, milking, bit of donut, wheat milk with a drop of maple syrup sticking to them, potato skin, leftover crusted pudding with raisins and bit of shredded wheat. Breakfast would be finished at 7.
I chose this passage because it was exciting to me. Stop, screamed Wilbur. I don't want to die. Save me, somebody save me. Fern was just about to jump up when a voice was heard. Be quiet, Wilbur, said Charlotte, who had been listening to this awful conversation.
So the reason I chose this passage is because it makes me understand how Wilbur is feeling and how desperate he is. Sadly, Wilbur laid down and listened to the rain. Soon he saw the rat climbing down the slanting board that he used as a stairway. Will you play with me, Templeton? Asked Wilbur. Play? Said Templeton, twirling his whiskers. Play? I hardly know the meaning of the word.
I chose this passage because I like the descriptions.
Late that afternoon, Lurvy went to Mr. Zutterman. I think there's something wrong with that pig of yours. He hasn't touched his food. Give him 2 spoonfuls of sulfur and a little molasses, said Mr. Zutterman. Wilbur couldn't believe what was happening to him. When Lurvy caught him and forced the medicine down his throat, this certainly was the worst day of his life. He didn't know whether he could endure the awful loneliness anymore.
I choose this passage because it is very descriptive. Next to her, attached to the ceiling, Wilbur saw a seriously object. It was a sort of sack or cocoon. It was peach-colored and looked as though it were made of cotton candy.
Yeah.
Baby spiders crawled to the top of the fence, stood on its head, made a balloon, and sailed away. Then other spiders, then another spider, then another spider, then another. The air was soon filled with tiny balloons. Each balloon carried a spider. And then he took another look, and he saw something that made him set his pail down. There, in the center of the web, neatly woven and blocked words, was a message. It said, "Some pig."
I saw this part. It was beautiful. The early summer day on a farm are the happiest and first day of the year.
I chose this passage because it went so well with the illustration. While the rat and the spider and the little girl watched, Wilbur climbed again to the top of the manure pile full of energy and hope. Everybody watched, he cried. I chose this passage because I like the description. When she opened her eyes, she was looking up into the blue sky and was about to fly back through the door. They took turns for an hour. When the children grew tired of screaming, they went down towards the pasture and picked wild raspberries and ate them.
Very good. Is your be really loud? You can't.
It's a good thing you can't see what I see. She said, "What do you see?" asked Wilbur. "There's a pig in the next pen and he's enormous. I'm afraid he's much bigger than you are." I chose the passage because I love the illustration. It was next.
They're ready.
The
Sorry.
reason because we picked page 28 and 29 is because sometimes it's hard to make friends, just like Wilbur. So let's begin. I don't play with pigs. Sadly, Wilbur lay down and listened to the rain. Soon he was the rat climbing down a slanting board. You know, use this good. That he used as a stairway. "Will you play with me, Templeton?" asked Wilbur. Play, said Templeton, twirling his whiskers. Play? I hardly know the meaning of the word. "Well," said Wilbur, "it means to have fun, to frolic, to run and skip and make merry."
Here we go.
The barn was very large. It was very old. It smelled of hay and it smelled of manure. It smelled of the perspiration of tired horses and wonderful sweet breath of
permit cows.
Full of the sorts of things that you find in barns: ladders, grindstones, pitchforks, monkeys, wrenches, lawn mowers, snow shovels, axe handles, milk pails, water buckets, empty drains, sacks, and rusty rat traps. It was the kind of barn that swallows like to build their nest, and it was the kind of barn that children like to play in. And the whole thing was owned by Fern's uncle, Mr. Zuckerman.
The barn was winter winds of cool summer wind brought big doors still wide open to the breeze. The barn had stalls on the main floor for the workhorses, pickups on the main floor for the cow. Sheep down below for the sheep and pig pen down below for Wilbur.
Okay, great. Sure, you can do that.
Pong heard paddle in the buttermilk. She rubbed him all over the grease, gathered around to see the fun, and so did the sheep and lambs.
Even Pimpleton moved his head out cautiously to watch Wilbur get a buttermilk box. Charlotte got so interested, she lowered herself.
I mean, she loved herself. Oh, lower.
Okay, guys done?
Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. Who's ready?
As soon as people were gone, Charlotte spoke to Wilbur. It's a good thing you can't see what I see, she said.
What do you see? Asked Wilbur. There's a pig in the next pen, and he's enormous.
I'm afraid he's much bigger than you. Maybe older than I am.
And has had more time to grow, suggests Wilbur.
Good job, you guys. You can just